The moon hung vast and silver over the blood-pine clearing, and Marilyn could already taste the betrayal coming. It rode the night wind like smoke, sharp and acrid, though she didn't yet understand why her fated bond felt less like golden thread and more like a noose tightening around her throat. By dawn she would know. By dawn, everything she believed about destiny would be ash. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. Tonight was supposed to be the night Marilyn's destiny bloomed, the night her fated bond to Alpha heir Elias Thornclair would be announced before the gathered wolves. Instead, it became the night she was shattered and remade. The clearing pulsed with ancient power, the air thick with wood smoke, crushed pine needles, and the musk of hundreds of shifting wolves. Marilyn stood at the very edge of the sacred circle, as was her place. An Omega. Always at the margins. Her hands trembled against the coarse fabric of her ceremonial dress, plain gray linen, while the ranked wolves wore silk and silver. But her heart hammered with something fiercer than fear. Tonight was the fated bonding ceremony. Tonight was her 20th year. Tonight, the moon goddess would vindicate every moment of mockery she'd endured. She could feel it even now, the bond that had hummed beneath her skin for months, a golden thread that pulled taut whenever Elias Thornclair was near. The future alpha of the Scarlet Fang pack. Their connection was undeniable, a secret she'd guarded like a fragile flame. It was the one truth that made being Omega, the pack's servant, the butt of every cruel joke, bearable. The bond didn't lie. The moon chose for reasons beyond rank. Her gaze drifted across the fire-lit circle to where Lucinda stood among the elite warriors, radiant and golden-haired. Marilyn's older sister. Lucinda had always been everything Marilyn was not, beautiful in the way that made wolves stop mid-sentence, confident in the way that commanded rooms, beloved in the way that came effortlessly. Their parents beamed at her. The pack elders nodded approvingly in her direction. Marilyn felt the familiar hollow ache in her chest, but tonight she forced it down. Tonight beauty didn't matter. Status didn't matter. Only the moon goddess and the fate she had written in silver fire. The pack alpha, Elias's father, raised his arms high. Silence crashed over the clearing like a wave. Tonight, his voice rolled across the assembly, deep as distant thunder. We honor the moon goddess. We honor the bonds she gifts us. We claim the mates she has chosen to strengthen the Scarlet Fang bloodline. A howl erupted from 300 throats. Marilyn shivered, the sound vibrating through her bones, primal and sacred. The moon climbed higher, a perfect silver coin suspended in the black velvet sky, bathing the clearing in ethereal light that made every wolf's eyes gleam like coins. Marilyn's breath caught. The bond was no longer a whisper. It was a rope of molten gold in her chest, pulling her forward with irresistible force. He was here. Elias was feeling it too. He had to be. He stepped into the center of the clearing. Elias Thornclair was everything an alpha heir should be. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a kind of presence that made even ranking wolves bow their heads instinctively. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes like polished amber that caught the firelight. He moved with lethal grace, every inch the heir to a legacy of dominance. Marilyn's heart climbed into her throat. This was the man the moon had chosen for her. The one who would finally see her, not as an Omega but as his equal, his fated mate. She waited for his eyes to find hers across the firelight, for the recognition that would change everything. Instead, Elias's gaze swept past her as if she were smoke, and locked on Lucinda. The silence that followed Marilyn's collapse was not peaceful. It was the silence of a sky before lightning strikes, charged, trembling, wrong. The torches surrounding the blood-pine clearing flickered violently though there was no wind. Shadows twisted and writhed against the ancient trees like living things trying to escape. The pack stirred uneasily, their celebratory howls dying in their throats. Even Elias, still clutching Lucinda's hand at the altar, felt it, a pressure building in the air that made his wolf whimper and press low in his mind. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually. All at once, as if winter itself had been summoned. Breath became visible in silver clouds. The ceremonial fires turned from orange to blue-white, crackling with an otherworldly intensity. Wolves backed away from the flames, eyes wide, and instincts screaming danger in a language older than words. "What?" Alpha Thornclair began, but his voice strangled in his throat. The presence descended like a mountain falling from the sky. It wasn't merely dominance. Every wolf in the clearing knew dominance, the weight of an alpha's command, the pressure of rank and hierarchy. This was something else entirely. This was the feeling of standing before an apex predator that could erase you from existence with a thought. This was divinity wearing the skin of a beast. The ranked wolves, betas, warriors, even the alpha himself, dropped to their knees as if their bones had turned to water. They didn't choose to kneel. Their bodies simply recognized a power so absolute that resistance was anatomically impossible. Marilyn's parents fell face first into the dirt. Lucinda gasped, her perfect composure shattering as her knees buckled. Only Elias remained standing, frozen in shock, his alpha blood fighting against the inevitable. From the shadow-thick tree line at the clearing's edge, he emerged. King Leroy Draegon. The Lycan monarch moved with the unhurried grace of something that had never known fear, had never needed to prove itself. He was taller than any wolf in the Scarlet Fang pack, 7 feet of coiled muscle and ancient power wrapped in midnight black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, pulled back from a face that was beautiful the way a sword is beautiful, all sharp edges and lethal precision. But it was his eyes that made wolves look away or go mad. Molten gold. Not amber like a common wolf's, but true gold, the color of the sun's core, of divine fire, of judgment itself. They glowed faintly in the darkness, twin coals that missed nothing. He had been standing there the entire time, watching, witnessing. Leroy's boots struck the ground with measured steps, and each footfall sent hairline cracks spiderwebbing through the packed earth. The sound echoed like thunder across the silent clearing. Wolves pressed their faces harder into the dirt, trembling. This was the Lycan who had brought 7 territories to heel, who had ended bloodlines with a word, whose name was whispered in the same breath as the moon goddess herself. And he was walking toward Marilyn's crumpled form with the focused intensity of a predator selecting prey. "Rise," Leroy said. His voice a low rumble that seemed to come from the earth itself. No one moved. No one dared. "I said rise." The command cracked through the air like a whip of pure authority. Slowly, shakily, the wolves lifted their heads, but remained kneeling. Even Alpha Thornclair, his face ashen, could only manage to raise his gaze to the Lycan King's boots. Leroy's golden eyes swept across the assembly with cold contempt. "Oh, this is the Scarlet Fang pack." His lip curled slightly. "I've seen more honor in carrion feeders." Elias finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. "Your Majesty, this is pack business. Private ceremony. We meant no disrespect." "Silence." The word was soft, gentle even. But it hit Elias like a physical blow, driving him to his knees at last. His carefully constructed alpha mask shattered. His hands pressed into the dirt, body bowing under invisible weight. Leroy stopped walking. The cracks in the earth beneath him widened, small stones tumbling into the fissures. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the clearing with the resonance of a funeral bell. "Who mocks the moon's gift in her own house?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because there was no answer that wouldn't be a confession. "I attended tonight as courtesy," Leroy continued, his gaze moving slowly from wolf to wolf. Each one he looked at flinched as if struck. "Your alpha invited the neighboring territories to witness the bonding ceremony, to strengthen alliances, to honor tradition." He paused, letting the words sink like stones into deep water. "Instead, I witnessed a festival of heresy." "Heresy?" Alpha Thornclair dared to speak, his voice cracking. "My king, I don't understand." "Don't you?" Leroy's head tilted slightly, a predator's gesture. The moon goddess herself writes the bonds. She chooses mates not by rank, not by beauty, not by the pathetic hierarchies you've constructed to make yourselves feel powerful. She chooses by the compatibility of souls. By destiny. He took another step. The ground beneath him groaned. And you? His gaze locked on Elias with such intensity that the young alpha heir began to shake. Rejected what she offered. Mocked it. Made spectacle of divine will. Leroy's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, yet every wolf heard it clearly. You turned sacred ceremony into theater. You kissed another woman on the altar of the moon while your fated mate, the woman she chose for you, lay broken at your feet. Elias's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Lucinda, still kneeling beside him, had gone paper white. It was tradition, Elias finally gasped. Pack law. Omegas cannot. An alpha cannot. Pack law. Leroy's laugh was a terrible sound, devoid of humor. You dare place your pack law above the divine. You dare tell the moon goddess that she made a mistake. He moved then, faster than should have been possible for something his size. One moment he stood 10 feet away. The next he was directly in front of Elias, towering over the kneeling alpha heir like a dark monument to judgment. Let me educate you on true law, Leroy said softly. When the moon goddess writes a bond, it is inviolable. To reject it is to spit in her face. To mock it publicly. His voice hardened into something that could shatter diamonds. Is blasphemy worthy of execution? Elias's eyes went wide with terror. Around the clearing, wolves began to keen low, frightened sounds. But Leroy turned away from him. Dismissed him as if he were nothing. As if he had already been judged and found too insignificant to punish personally. The Lycan King walked to where Marilyn lay unconscious in the dirt, her plain gray dress torn, her face streaked with tears and earth. She looked so small, so fragile, like something the pack had used and discarded. Something in Leroy's expression shifted. The cold rage remained, but beneath it flickered something almost tender. Almost, said. He knelt. The king of all Lycans, the apex predator of their world, lowered himself to one knee beside a broken Omega girl in the dirt. The pack gasped collectively. In 1,000 years of Lycan history, their kings knelt for no one, not even other monarchs. The gesture was so unprecedented, so impossible, that several wolves looked away as if witnessing something too sacred for common eyes. Leroy's large hand hovered over Marilyn's throat for a moment. Then he pressed 2 fingers to the soft skin just below her jaw. Forgive me, he whispered, so quietly only those closest could hear. This will hurt. But you will survive it. You were always meant to survive. Golden light erupted from his fingertips. Not the gentle glow of moonlight. This was the light of stars being born. Violent, searing, divine. It poured from his hand into Marilyn's skin, and where it touched, a mark began to form. An intricate sigil that looked like flames frozen in the moment of dancing, like a crown rendered in pure fire, like ancient runes that predated written language. The crown of flame. The air itself screamed. Reality rippled outward from the mark in visible waves. Every wolf in the clearing felt it slam into them. A surge of power so profound that their wolves howled in their minds, recognizing something primal and absolute. This was not pack magic. This was not even normal Lycan power. This was divine claiming. The mark of kings. A bond that transcended mortality. Marilyn's body arched, her back lifting from the ground as if pulled by invisible strings. Golden light poured from her mouth, her eyes, and the mark on her throat. Her scream split the night, but it wasn't entirely pain. It was transformation, rebirth. The sound of a soul being remade in celestial fire. The Omega scent that had clung to her. That faint, easily dismissed essence that had marked her as lowest rank, burned away like morning mist. In its place bloomed something that made every wolf's instincts snap to attention. Power. Pure, undeniable, sovereign power. Lucinda stumbled backward, eyes wide with disbelief. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. But it was happening. Before 300 witnesses, the girl they'd mocked was being crowned by something far greater than any pack ceremony. Marilyn's eyes opened. They were no longer the soft brown they'd been. They glowed with inner light, silver like the moon, shot through with veins of gold. When she gasped her first breath of this new life, the sound rang like a bell across the clearing. She felt it immediately. The power coursing through her veins wasn't borrowed or granted. It was hers, awakened and remembered. Like muscle memory from a life she'd never lived but had always been destined for. Her grandmother's blood. The lunar warrior lineage she'd never known existed. It sang in her bones now, unmistakable and fierce. Leroy helped her sit up. His touch gentle despite the calluses of 1,000 battles. "Easy," he murmured. "Your body needs a moment to adjust." Marilyn's gaze found his, and for a heartbeat, the clearing fell away. It was just the two of them, the ancient king and the newly awakened queen, recognition passing between them like a prayer. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice hoarse but threaded with new strength. "What you cast aside," Leroy said, loud enough for the entire pack to hear. "The moon restores." He rose to his full height, pulling her gently up with him. "What you mocked in your ignorance, she elevates in her wisdom." He turned to face the assembly, keeping one hand at the small of Marilyn's back, steadying her but also presenting her. The message was clear. "She is under my protection. She is mine." "Look at her," Leroy commanded, and every eye turned to Marilyn against their will. "The Omega you scorned. The mate you rejected. The moon goddess has shown you the truth of her choice." The mark on Marilyn's throat pulsed with light, casting her face in gold and shadow. She looked transformed, not just in power but in presence. The hunched, desperate girl who'd stood at the clearing's edge was gone. In her place stood someone who radiated quiet authority, whose very existence demanded acknowledgement. Alpha Thorn Clare found his voice, shaking. "Your Majesty, please, we didn't know." "You didn't know." Leroy's laugh was scathing. "You didn't know that rejecting a fated bond brings divine retribution. That mocking the moon's choice is blasphemy. Or you simply didn't care because she was Omega, and you believed rank made you untouchable." Silence. Damning, complete silence. "Before this night ends," Leroy said, his voice dropping into something ceremonial, something that sounded like prophecy, "you will all bear witness to correction. The Scarlet Fang pack will kneel before the one you cast aside. You will acknowledge her as what she was always meant to be." He raised his free hand, and the golden light intensified around Marilyn until she seemed to glow from within. The crown of flame mark spread slightly, delicate tendrils of fire script curling down her collarbone, beautiful and terrible. "I, Leroy Draegon, King of Lycans, Sovereign of the 7 territories, chosen of the Blood Moon." His voice resonated with power that made the trees shake. "Declare this woman under royal protection. Any who harm her, slight her, or speak against her will answer to me. And I promise you," his smile was all teeth, "my justice is far less merciful than the moon's." He waited, letting the weight of his words settle like snow. "Kneel," he said softly. As one, the entire Scarlet Fang pack dropped to the ground. Alphas, betas, warriors, elders, parents, all of them pressed their foreheads to the earth before Marilyn. Even Elias, his face twisted with humiliation and dawning horror at what he'd done. Even Lucinda, her golden hair falling around her face as she bowed, mind racing with poison. Only Marilyn remained standing, held upright by Leroy's steady hand, her new power thrumming through her like a second heartbeat. She looked down at the bowing wolves, these people who'd made her life misery, who'd laughed at her pain and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just a strange, hollow distance, as if she were already becoming someone else. Someone they could never touch again. "It's time to leave this place," Leroy said quietly, meant only for her ears. "You don't belong here anymore. Perhaps you never did." He raised 2 fingers and slashed them through the air. Reality tore. A portal erupted into existence, a vertical slash of golden fire that revealed glimpses of somewhere else. Somewhere vast and dark and powerful. Obsidian towers. Blue flames. A palace carved from volcanic stone. The Lycan court. From the shadows beyond the portal, a creature materialized. It looked like a horse the way a hurricane looks like a breeze, the echo of something familiar twisted into myth. It was made of living shadow and starlight, its eyes burning like coals, its mane flowing with phantom fire. A shadow steed. Mount of Kings. Leroy lifted Marilyn effortlessly onto its back, then swung up behind her. His arms bracketed her body, protective and possessive all at once. The mark on her throat pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. She looked back one final time at the bloodpine clearing. At Elias, still kneeling, his face buried in his hands. At her parents, who'd never defended her, never seen her. At Lucinda, whose head had lifted just enough to watch them leave. And oh, the expression on her beautiful face. Disbelief. And beneath it all, the seed of something dark and festering. Envy. Goodbye, Marilyn whispered, though whether it was to the pack or to the person she used to be, even she wasn't sure. Leroy's voice rumbled against her back. Hold on. The shadow steed leaped through the portal. Golden fire consumed them, reality folding around their bodies like wings. The last thing the Scarlet Fang pack saw was their new queen disappearing into divine light, claimed by a power they'd never understand, elevated to a throne they'd never reach. The portal sealed shut with a sound like thunder. And the bloodpine clearing, for the first time in 100 years, fell absolutely, devastatingly silent. The portal expelled them into a world that stole Marilyn's breath. She'd expected grandeur. Every wolf pup heard tales of the Obsidian Court, the seat of Lycan power where kings ruled for centuries and magic ran thick as blood. But stories were pale shadows compared to reality. The fortress rose before them like a mountain that had learned to dream. Carved entirely from volcanic stone so dark it seemed to swallow light, the palace thrust upward in impossible spires and sweeping arches that defied mortal engineering. Blue flames danced in massive braziers positioned along the ramparts, not flickering like normal fire, but burning with steady, eternal intensity. They cast everything in an otherworldly glow, turning shadows into liquid sapphire. The shadow steed's hooves struck polished obsidian flagstones, the sound ringing clear as bells. Marilyn's fingers tightened instinctively on the creature's mane, which felt like cool smoke beneath her touch, as her senses struggled to process the sheer magnitude of power saturating this place. The air itself tasted different, thicker, ancient, like breathing in history and magic and the accumulated weight of 1,000 generations. Her wolf, still transforming from the awakening Leroy had triggered, whimpered and pressed low in her mind. This wasn't just a palace. This was a nexus point where the veil between worlds grew thin, where divine and mortal intersected. Steady, Leroy murmured against her ear, his arms still bracketing her body. His voice held an edge of amusement. The court can be overwhelming on first encounter. Breathe through it. She tried, drew in a shaking breath and immediately tasted ozone and something sweeter, like moonflowers blooming in darkness. The crown of flame mark on her throat pulsed warmly, as if responding to the ambient magic, grounding her. Leroy dismounted in one fluid motion, then lifted her down with the same careful gentleness he'd shown in the clearing. The shadow steed nuzzled her shoulder once, a gesture that felt like blessing, before dissolving into wisps of smoke that spiraled upward toward the starbright sky. Only then did Marilyn notice they weren't alone. Figures emerged from the palace's massive entrance, a doorway 30 feet high carved with runic script that seemed to shift and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at it. The court's inhabitants moved with the predatory grace inherent to all wolf kind, but these were no common pack members. They were Lycans, true Lycans, the ancient bloodlines that predated modern packs by millennia. Each one radiated power that made Marilyn's newly awakened instincts scream both submission and awe. There were no omegas here. No visible hierarchy of dominance and subjugation. These wolves moved like apex predators who'd never known what it meant to bow, except to the figure standing beside her. A woman approached first, tall and regal in flowing robes of midnight blue that matched the brazier flames. Her hair was white silver, her eyes the pale gold of winter sunlight, her age impossible to determine. She could have been 30 or 3,000. "My king," she said, her voice like wind chimes crafted from crystal. Her gaze slid to Marilyn, and something flickered in those ancient eyes. Surprise. Approval. "You return with unexpected company. Lady Seraphine." Leroy inclined his head slightly, a mark of respect Marilyn suspected he granted few. "May I present Marilyn of the Scarlet Fang Pack?" He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried across the assembled crowd with deliberate weight. "My chosen, marked by the moon herself." Whispers erupted like a disturbed hive. "A common wolf. The Scarlet Fang Pack. They're barely. Look at her mark. That's the crown of flame. Impossible. The king hasn't claimed anyone in 3 centuries. Is she even?" "Enough." Leroy didn't shout. He didn't need to. The single word cracked through the murmurs like a whip, and instant silence fell. His golden eyes swept the assembled Lycans with cold authority. "The moon goddess writes the bonds. Not you. Not tradition. Not the prejudices of lesser packs who've forgotten what true power looks like." He placed his hand at the small of Marilyn's back, a gesture of protection and possession that every Lycan present understood immediately. "Marilyn bears my mark. She stands under my protection, and she will be accorded the respect due to one chosen by divine will." His voice dropped into something darker, more dangerous. "Anyone who questions this questions me. I trust I've made myself clear." The assembled Lycans dropped smoothly into bows. Not the desperate, fearful prostration of the Scarlet Fang Pack, but fluid acknowledgement of sovereign authority. When they rose, their expressions had shifted. Curiosity replacing skepticism, calculation tempering judgment. All except one. A younger male, perhaps in his 3rd century by the silver threading his dark hair, studied Marilyn with open fascination. "Forgive my boldness, my king, but..." He gestured toward her throat. "The crown of flame hasn't been used since the Blood Wars. To mark her with such ancient binding, she must be extraordinary indeed." Leroy's expression revealed nothing. "The moon doesn't make mistakes, Lord Cashin." "Of course not." Cashin's smile was sharp, intelligent. "I meant no offense. Merely surprise. Welcome to the Obsidian Court, Lady Marilyn. I suspect you'll find it quite different from Scarlet Fang territory." "That," Lady Seraphine interjected smoothly, "is an understatement of epic proportions." He turned to Leroy. "Shall I arrange quarters? The eastern tower overlooks the lunar gardens. Privacy and proximity to the training grounds." "Yes. And summon Kalira." Leroy's tone brooked no argument. "Training begins tomorrow." Seraphine's eyebrows rose fractionally. "The royal seeress. For basic combat instruction." "My king, surely." "Nothing about this is basic." Leroy's hand pressed slightly firmer against Marilyn's back. "She carries warrior blood, ancient lineage that's been dormant for generations. Needs to be awakened properly. Kalira is the only one I trust for this." The whispers started again, softer this time, threaded with genuine intrigue. Warrior blood. In an Omega. The impossibility of it warred with the evidence burning gold on Marilyn's throat. "As you command." Seraphine bowed deeper this time. "I'll make the arrangements immediately." She glided away, taking most of the assembled court with her. Their departure felt orchestrated, giving their king privacy while simultaneously spreading news of his unexpected choice through every corner of the palace. By dawn, Marilyn suspected, every Lycan in the 7 territories would know about the Omega marked by the crown of flame. Only Lord Cashin lingered, his expression thoughtful. "A word of advice, if I may." He addressed Marilyn directly this time. "The court thrives on politics and intrigue. You'll hear whispers, Wolves among gods, they'll say. Pretender. Opportunist. Don't let it shake you. The king's judgment is absolute. If he's marked you, there's a reason the rest of us haven't yet comprehended. Thank you, Marilyn managed, finding her voice for the first time since arriving. It came out steadier than she'd expected. Cashin's smile warmed genuinely. Besides, anyone brave enough or foolish enough to challenge Leroy Draegon's choice deserves respect for sheer audacity. He bowed to them both and disappeared into the palace's depths, leaving Marilyn alone with the Lycan King under a sky full of unfamiliar stars. Leroy's hand remained at her back, a constant warmth that both steadied and unsettled her. When he spoke, his voice had lost its formal edge, becoming something quieter, almost gentle. Are you overwhelmed? Marilyn laughed, a short, breathless sound. That might be the understatement of the century. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're handling it better than most would. The court's power signature alone has driven lesser wolves to madness. I don't feel like I'm handling anything. I feel like... She struggled for words, looking up at the obsidian towers that seemed to pierce the heavens themselves. Like I'm standing in a story that isn't mine. Like any moment now, I'll wake up back in the Scarlet Fang Omega quarters, and this will have been a dream born of desperation. It's no dream. Leroy's hand moved from her back to her shoulder, turning her gently to face him. His golden eyes caught the blue firelight, making them seem to glow from within. The mark on your throat is real. The power awakening in your blood is real. And the choice the moon made, connecting your fate to mine, is as real as stone and starlight. The mark pulsed at his words, sending warmth cascading down Marilyn's spine. She shivered despite herself. Why? The question burst from her before she could stop it. Why me? I'm nobody. An Omega from a minor pack who can't even shift properly. There must be thousands of female wolves more worthy. Worthy? Leroy's expression hardened. That word, I despise it, implies some cosmic scale of measurement, some arbitrary standard of value. He released her shoulder, but his gaze remained locked on hers. The moon doesn't choose based on rank or bloodline or political advantage. She chooses based on what we need, not what we think we deserve. He turned, gesturing toward the palace. Come. I'll show you something. Marilyn followed him through the towering entrance, trying not to gape like a country mouse in a cathedral. The palace interior defied rational architecture. Corridors seemed to stretch into infinity, staircases spiraled in directions that shouldn't exist, and everywhere, blue flames danced without heat or smoke. Leroy led her through passages that opened onto impossible vistas, a library carved into the heart of a crystal geode, walls lined with books bound in dragon leather and moonlight, an armory where weapons hung in perfect rows, each one humming with barely contained power, a garden that shouldn't exist underground, where silver flowers bloomed beneath artificial stars. Finally, they emerged onto a balcony overlooking the true magnitude of the obsidian court. The fortress sprawled across miles of volcanic terrain, a city unto itself. Thousands of lights glittered in the darkness. Windows, torches, magical wards creating constellations on Earth. In the distance, Marilyn could see training grounds where wolves sparred in both human and shifted forms, their movements too fast for mortal eyes. Gardens cascaded down terraced levels, impossible greenery thriving in this harsh landscape through sheer magical will. And beyond it all, 7 massive towers rose like fingers pointing accusation at the sky, each one representing a territory under Leroy's dominion. 3,000 years, Leroy said quietly, leaning against the balcony's obsidian railing. I've ruled from this fortress for 3,000 years. Seen empires rise and crumble. Watched mortal wolves dilute their bloodlines chasing power they didn't understand. Presided over wars that carved new continents and extinguished ancient bloodlines. He turned his head, golden eyes finding hers in the darkness. In all that time, I've never taken a queen. Never marked anyone with the crown of flame. Do you know why? Marilyn shook her head, throat tight. Because I was waiting. His voice dropped to something almost vulnerable. The moon kept showing me fragments and visions, a face I couldn't quite see, a presence I couldn't quite grasp. She told me to wait, to trust, that when the time came I would know. He pushed off the railing, moving closer. Not threatening, but intense in a way that made Marilyn's newly awakened power sing in response. When I felt the bond snap into place tonight, when I saw you standing in that clearing with tears on your face and rejection shattering your soul. His jaw clenched. I knew. This was the one the moon had been preparing me for. Not some perfect Lycan princess. Not a warrior queen already forged in battle. But you. Broken and discarded and beautiful in your refusal to surrender completely. Marilyn's breath caught. I don't understand. You will. Leroy's hand rose, fingers hovering near her face without quite touching. Power without compassion becomes tyranny. Strength without vulnerability becomes isolation. I've ruled for 3 millennia, Marilyn. I'm respected, feared, obeyed without question. But I've forgotten what it means to be mortal, to struggle, to doubt. His fingers finally made contact, brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. The crown of flame mark flared in response, and both of them gasped at the jolt of connection. Not painful but intense, like touching lightning and finding it warm. You remind me, he whispered. You make me remember what I'm protecting. Why power exists in the first place. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Marilyn felt herself leaning into his touch without conscious decision, drawn by magnetism that transcended mere attraction. This was bond pull, divine design. 2 halves of a cosmic whole recognizing each other. Then Leroy stepped back, breaking contact. His expression shuttered, becoming the distant king once more. But this is too soon, he said, voice rough. You're still adjusting, still transforming. And I. A muscle worked in his jaw. I've waited 3,000 years. I can wait a little longer. Until you choose this freely, without gratitude or obligation clouding your judgment. The loss of his touch left Marilyn cold, but she understood. Respected it even. He was giving her space when he could have claimed her completely, using the bond and his authority to override her will. The restraint in that gesture spoke louder than any declaration. Thank you, she said softly. Brief nod. Then he turned toward the palace interior. Come. Seraphine will have prepared your quarters. You need rest. Tomorrow your Real training begins. The Eastern Tower proved as magnificent as promised. Marilyn's chambers occupied 3 levels connected by a spiral staircase carved from single piece of obsidian. Windows overlooked gardens where lunar flowers bloomed silver and blue, their petals tracking the moon's path across the sky. Furnishing spoke of understated wealth, silk sheets the color of midnight, furniture inlaid with mother-of-pearl constellations, a bathing pool fed by an underground hot spring. It was a queen's quarters, designed for someone who belonged here. Marilyn stood at the window as dawn approached, watching the court come alive below. Wolves moved through courtyards with purpose, their conversations creating a distant murmur. No one looked lost or beaten down. No one hunched to make themselves smaller. A knock at the door pulled her from observation. The woman who entered radiated otherworldly presence even by Lycan standards. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that held entire galaxies. Her hair floated around her head in defiance of gravity, each strand seeming to move independently like living things. She wore robes covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than mortal eyes could process. Lady Marilyn. Her voice sounded like prophecy and morning coffee combined, startling and comforting at once. I am Kalira, royal seeress and keeper of ancient ways. The king has commanded I train you. Train me in what exactly? Marilyn asked, trying not to stare at the way reality seemed to bend slightly around Kalira's form. Everything. Kalira's smile was sharp as broken glass. How to access your warrior blood. How to channel lunar energy without burning yourself hollow. How to move between worlds without losing yourself. How to be what the moon intended, not what your pack told you to be. She moved to the window, studying Marilyn with disconcerting intensity. This will not be gentle, child. Awakening dormant power is like breaking bones to set them properly. Necessary but agonizing. Are you prepared for that? Marilyn thought of Elias's expression when he chose Lucinda. Her parents' indifference. The pack's laughter. The years of being invisible, insignificant, less than nothing. Yes, she said firmly. I'm prepared. Good. Kalira's eyes flashed with approval. We begin at moonrise. Where something you don't mind destroying, the first transformation tends to be dramatic. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. Whispers have already reached the court from your former pack. They're calling you a sorceress. Claiming you bewitched the king with forbidden magic. Ice formed in Marilyn's stomach. That's insane. I didn't. Of course you didn't. Kalira waved dismissively. Power always invites envy. Those who feel threatened will create narratives to explain what they cannot accept. A commoner marked by the crown of flame. It must be trickery, they think. Must be manipulation. They cannot conceive that the moon might value different qualities than they do. She fixed Marilyn with a penetrating stare. The king warned you, I assume. Guard your silence. Don't defend yourself to those who've already decided you're unworthy. Let your actions speak. Let your growth answer. And when the time comes, when you stand before doubters and accusers, let them see exactly how catastrophically they underestimated you. With that, she swept from the room, leaving behind the scent of ozone and starlight. Marilyn returned to the window, watching the court's daily rhythms continue below. Somewhere out there, in a territory she'd never see again, her former pack was spreading poison, painting her as villain in a story where she'd only ever been victim. Let them, she thought, pressing her palm against the crown of flame mark. It pulsed warmly, steadily, like a second heartbeat. She'd spent her entire life trying to prove she deserved basic dignity, basic respect, the bare minimum of acknowledgement that she was wolf and worthy. Now the moon herself had placed a crown upon her. Not a metaphorical crown, a literal mark of sovereignty that burned with divine fire. Marilyn stared at her reflection in the window glass. At the woman she was becoming, still rough, still uncertain, but no longer hunched. No longer trying to disappear. I will earn this, she whispered to her reflection, to the moon, to the mark burning gold against her skin. Not to prove them wrong. Not for revenge. But because you chose me for a reason, and I intend to discover what that reason is. Her wolf stirred in response, no longer the cowering broken thing from the Scarlet Fang Omega quarters. This wolf was waking up. Remembering strength bred into her bones by ancestors who'd fought beside gods. Outside, the moon began to set, making way for the sun. But in the obsidian court, where magic and reality intertwined, both celestial bodies lingered visible for a perfect moment. Sun and moon sharing the sky. An omen, perhaps, or a promise. Marilyn smiled, fierce and small and utterly determined. Tomorrow, her transformation would truly begin. Lucinda Ashford had never known what it meant to be invisible. From birth she'd been golden, literally and metaphorically. Golden hair that caught sunlight like captured fire. Golden eyes that wolves would drown themselves in. The golden child of the Ashford bloodline, blessed with beauty and rank in equal measure. She'd grown accustomed to being the center of every room, the prize every male wolf desired, the standard against which all other females were measured and found wanting. Now, 3 days after the rejection ceremony, she understood what invisibility tasted like. Bitter, ashen copper, like blood in her mouth. She stood at the window of the Ashford estate, watching the pack grounds below with hands clenched white-knuckled on the sill. Wolves moved through their daily routines, but something fundamental had shifted. Where before they would pause to admire her if she appeared, Now their gazes slid away. Conversations died when she approached. Invitations that used to flow like water had dried to a trickle, then stopped entirely. They didn't shun her openly. No one dared insult the alpha heir's chosen mate. But the warmth had vanished. The reverence. The automatic deference her beauty and status had always commanded. 'Cause everyone knew. Everyone whispered. The king chose the Omega over her. What does that say about Lucinda's worth? Perhaps she's not as special as we thought. The moon passed her over. Rejected her, even if indirectly. The whispers slithered through the pack like poison in veins, and Lucinda felt her carefully constructed identity crumbling with each repetition. She'd built her entire existence on being the best, the most desirable, the obvious choice. And in one night, an insignificant Omega girl with plain features and no status had shattered that illusion simply by existing. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't turn. Lucinda. Elias's voice was hollow, scraped raw by guilt and confusion. We need to talk about the bonding ceremony. Father wants to move forward within the month. Don't. The word cracked like ice breaking. Don't you dare talk to me about ceremonies right now? Silence. Then softer. I don't understand what happened either. The bond was supposed to be severed. When I rejected her publicly, it should have broken. But it didn't. Lucinda spun to face him, and the expression on her beautiful features was something ugly. Twisted. It stayed intact. Grew stronger even. Because she's fated. Actually. Genuinely fated by the moon goddess herself. And I'm. Her voice broke. I'm just convenient. Elias flinched. That's not fair. We chose each other. What we have is real. Is it? She laughed, the sound jagged as broken glass. Then why can't you look me in the eye anymore? Why do you flinch every time someone mentions the king's visit? Why do you spend every night pacing your quarters instead of coming to mine? He had no answer. The truth sat between them like a corpse neither wanted to acknowledge. The bond pull to Marilyn hadn't disappeared with rejection. If anything, it had intensified, becoming a constant ache in Elias's chest, a phantom limb he couldn't stop reaching for. His wolf howled for its mate every moonrise, and no amount of logic or chosen love could silence it. I thought, Lucinda whispered, turning back to the window, that if the moon wanted her to have him, at least I would have you. At least I would still be somebody's first choice. But I'm not, am I? I never was. I'm just the acceptable alternative to a bond you couldn't stomach. Lucinda. Get out. Her voice went cold. Deadly. Get out before I say something we'll both regret. Elias hesitated, then retreated. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid sealing. Lucinda stared at her reflection in the window glass. Still beautiful, that hadn't changed. But beauty without purpose was just decoration. And she'd been reduced to ornament in a narrative where she should have been queen. The injustice of it burned like acid in her veins. She'd done everything right. Maintained her status, her appearance, her carefully cultivated image of perfection. She'd played by the rules, followed pack law, positioned herself exactly where tradition dictated she should be. And Marilyn, pathetic, broken Omega Marilyn, had done nothing except exist. Had stumbled into divine favor through sheer dumb luck. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. If I can't be blessed, Lucinda whispered to her reflection, something dark and desperate crystallizing in her chest, I'll make the goddess regret her choice. The traveling merchants arrived at Scarlet Fong territory 2 days later, their wagons loaded with goods from the eastern provinces. Among them was a weasel-faced man named Silas who dealt in more than silk and spices. He traded in information, secrets, and connections to wolves who operated in shadows. Lucinda met him in a forgotten corner of the Pax Market Square. Hood drawn low despite the warm afternoon. Miss Ashford. Silas's smile revealed too many teeth. Rare to see nobility slumming in the merchant quarters. What can I do for such an esteemed customer? I need information delivered. She pressed a heavy purse into his palm. Gold clinked softly. To specific wolves in specific territories. Can you be discreet? Discretion is my specialty. The purse disappeared into his coat. What sort of information? Lucinda glanced around, ensuring no pack members lingered within earshot. Then she leaned closer, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The new queen, the one the Lycan King marked. I have evidence of her true nature. Documents, testimonies, proof that she manipulated events to secure her position through forbidden magic and deceit. Silas's eyebrows rose. Bold accusations against one under the king's protection. Not accusations. Facts. Lucinda's eyes glittered with malice. I witnessed her meeting with Elias in secret before the ceremony. Saw her slip him a tonic laced with compulsion magic to ensure he would reject her publicly. All theater designed to earn the king's sympathy. She orchestrated her own humiliation knowing he was watching. It was masterfully crafted fiction. Just plausible enough to plant doubt, impossible to disprove without Marilyn's presence, and calculated to exploit existing prejudices about Omega cunning and low-born ambition. Silas studied her face, reading the desperation beneath the composure. And you want this information to reach the noble houses, the territorial alphas, anyone who might have the king's ear. Lucinda's jaw set. The court should know what manner of creature they're harboring. What kind of sorceress has bewitched their sovereign? This could start a war, Miss Ashford. Or it could prevent one. She met his gaze steadily. A king compromised by enchantment is a threat to all territories. I'm trying to protect the realm. The lie came easily. Righteousness always sounded better than revenge. Silas pocketed the gold and offered a mocking bow. As you wish, miss. Consider it done. He disappeared into the merchant crowds, carrying Lucinda's poison like a plague vector ready to infect the 7 territories. Over the following week, Lucinda became a ghost in her own pack. She moved through shadows, meeting with carefully selected wolves, those nursing their own grievances against the court, those who resented Lycan authority, and those who secretly believed Omegas should never rise above their station. To each, she presented evidence. Forged letters in Marilyn's handwriting, crude approximations, but convincing to those who wanted to believe. Testimonies from wolves she'd bribed or blackmailed, all swearing they'd witnessed suspicious behavior. Fragments of truth twisted into elaborate lies. Yes, Marilyn had been present at the ceremony. Yes, the king had marked her. Yes, she'd risen impossibly fast from Omega to Queen. The only explanation that made sense to jealous minds. Manipulation. Enchantment. Forbidden magic wielded by a desperate wolf willing to damn her soul for power. Lucinda crafted the narrative with an artist's precision, painting Marilyn as villain while casting herself as concerned observer. She never named herself in the accusations. That would be too obvious. Instead, she worked through proxies, let others carry her poison forward, watched the lies spread like ink in water. And at night, alone in her chambers, she drafted the final piece. The anonymous decree took 3 drafts to perfect. It had to sound official without being traceable, authoritative without revealing its source. She wrote it on parchment stolen from the pack's administrative offices, sealed it with wax she'd carefully melted to obscure any identifying marks. To the noble houses of the Obsidian Court. Let it be known that grave concerns have arisen regarding the female marked by His Majesty. Multiple witnesses from Scarlet Fang territory attest to suspicious conduct prior to the bonding ceremony. Evidence suggests use of forbidden compulsion magic to manufacture circumstances designed to manipulate the king's sympathy. The accused, Marilyn of Scarlet Fang, Omega-born, now claiming title of queen. The charges: treasonous enchantment of the sovereign, deliberate deception of the crown, violation of sacred bond law through magical manipulation. In the interest of the realm's security and the king's honor, a formal inquiry is demanded. Let the accused face public trial so that truth may be revealed and justice served. Submitted in faith and loyalty to the crown. A concerned subject of the 7 territories. Lucinda read it over one final time, satisfaction warming her chest like expensive wine. It was perfect, damning without being hysterical, serious without being obviously vindictive. She handed it to Silas during his next visit, along with another purse of gold, the last of her personal savings, but worth every coin if it achieved the desired result. "Deliver this to the court directly," she instructed. "To a noble sympathetic to tradition. Someone who already questions the king's judgment in this matter." Silas tucked the scroll into his coat. "Consider it done, Miss Ashford. Though I should warn you, if this traces back to you, it won't." Her smile was cold as winter stars. "I've been very careful." The decree traveled like disease through the 7 territories. From Silas's hands to a minor noble in the Stoneclaw province, who harbored resentment toward Leroy's absolutist rule. From there to a territorial alpha who'd lost status in a recent court judgment. From the alpha to his beta, who had cousins serving in the Obsidian Court's administrative halls. Each transmission added weight to the accusations. Each repetition made the lies more believable. By the time the scroll reached the court itself, it had passed through enough hands that its origins were thoroughly obscured. Wolves whispered in corridor corners. Servants exchanged glances. Even nobles who privately doubted the accusations found themselves wondering, was it possible? Could an Omega have deceived their king? The doubt spread like rot through timber, invisible until the structure collapsed. Marilyn felt it before she understood it. The bond with Leroy had been growing steadily warmer since her arrival. Not the desperate, clawing need of new mates, but something deeper. Foundation being laid. Trust building brick by careful brick. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past week. Training sessions with Kalira during the day, quiet dinners in the evening where they talked about everything and nothing, stolen moments on the eastern balcony watching moonrise. She was beginning to believe she might actually belong here. Then the temperature dropped. Started subtly. Leroy's responses during dinner became shorter, distracted. His attention drifted during conversation. The casual touches that had become natural. His hand at her elbow, fingers brushing her shoulder, disappeared entirely. The bond, which had hummed warm and constant in her chest, turned cool. Not severed but distant. Like he'd stepped behind a wall she couldn't see. "Is something wrong?" she asked on the 3rd night of this strange coldness, setting down her fork with careful precision. Leroy's golden eyes met hers briefly, then slid away. "Nothing that concerns you directly. Court business. I'm part of the court now. If something affects you." "I said it doesn't concern you." His tone was sharper than she'd ever heard it. Not cruel but closed. Absolute. Marilyn flinched. The rejection, even mild, even unintentional, struck her in exactly the place Elias had wounded. She stood abruptly. "I see. Then I'll leave you to your business." She fled before he could respond, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall. In the corridor outside the dining hall, she pressed her back against cool obsidian and tried to breathe through the panic rising in her throat. This was temporary, she told herself. He was stressed. Dealing with something difficult. It didn't mean. "Can't believe the king is actually considering it." Marilyn froze. The voices came from around the corner. 2 servants speaking in hushed tones. Considering what? The second voice was curious, gossipy. The accusations. About the new queen. Apparently multiple witnesses from her old pack say she used forbidden magic to. No. Magic. Her. "I'm just telling you what I heard. Compulsion magic. Made the whole ceremony happen exactly as she wanted so the king would feel sorry for her and..." Marilyn stopped listening. The words crashed over her like ice water, each one a physical blow. Accusations. Forbidden magic. Witnesses. Someone was spreading lies about her. Deliberate, calculated lies designed to, what? Destroy her. Turn Leroy against her. Both. The bond made sudden, terrible sense. He'd heard the accusations. Was questioning everything. Wondering if the connection between them was genuine or manufactured. If she was victim or villain. Guard your silence, Kalira had warned. Let your actions speak. But how could she prove her innocence against invisible accusers? How could she defend herself against lies told in her absence? Marilyn's hands clenched into fists. The crown of flame mark pulsed erratically, responding to her emotional turmoil. Power flickered beneath her skin, the ancestral strength Kalira had been teaching her to channel, but it felt wild, unstable. Not yet, she told herself. Not like this. Control. She needed control. She made her way back to her chambers, mind racing. Tomorrow she would demand answers. Would force Leroy to tell her exactly what he'd heard and from whom. A formal summons waited on her desk, sealed with the king's sigil in blood-red wax. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Lady Marilyn of Scarlet Fang. Your presence is required at emergency council session. Dawn, the Obsidian Throne Room. Matters of royal honor demand inquiry. By order of King Leroy Draegon. The parchment slipped from her fingers. Hours away. An emergency council. Matters of royal honor. This wasn't a private conversation. This was formal, public, official. She was being summoned to answer for crimes she hadn't committed, in front of nobles who already doubted her worth. Marilyn sank onto the edge of her bed, the weight of history crushing down on her shoulders. She'd been here before, standing accused while others judged her, with no voice to defend herself and no power to change the outcome. The only difference this time was that the stakes had grown exponentially higher. Before, she'd lost a mate and a pack. Now she stood to lose everything. The Obsidian Throne Room was designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. 200 feet long, carved entirely from a single piece of volcanic stone that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. Pillars rose like petrified giants, their surfaces etched with the names of every Lycan King dating back to the First Age. Blue flames danced in massive braziers suspended from chains that had no visible anchor points, casting everything in shifting sapphire shadows. At the far end, elevated on a dais of polished obsidian, sat the throne itself, a masterwork of forbidden craftsmanship, forged from the bones of fallen gods and crowned with moon silver. It radiated power that made lesser wolves weep. Leroy occupied it now, every inch the ancient king. His armor was ceremonial black plate etched with gold runes, his expression carved from the same stone as his fortress. The casual warmth Marilyn had glimpsed during private moments had vanished entirely, replaced by something remote and absolute. Terrible, in the original sense of the word. Inspiring terror. The court had assembled in full, hundreds of Lycans filling the throne room, their combined power signature making the air thick as honey. Nobles in formal regalia, warriors in dress armor, seers and scholars and territorial representatives, all watching with predatory intensity as Marilyn was led to stand before the throne. Kalira had dressed her carefully that morning, not in the fine gown she'd been given, but in simple gray, the color of omegas, of humility, of accused criminals awaiting judgment. The symbolism was deliberate and damning. Lord Cashin stood to Leroy's right, his expression carefully neutral. Lady Seraphine occupied the left, her ancient eyes unreadable. Between them, a scholar in midnight blue robes held a scroll, the anonymous decree, Marilyn realized. The accusations that had poisoned everything. This emergency council, Leroy's voice rang across the throne room, formal and distant, has been called to address grave accusations against Lady Marilyn of Scarlet Fang, currently bearing my mark and the title of chosen queen. A ripple moved through the assembled court. Anticipation. Bloodlust. The ancient need to witness judgment being rendered. The scholar unfurled the scroll and began to read in a clear, carrying voice. Every word was a knife in Marilyn's chest. Forbidden magic. Deliberate manipulation. Treasonous enchantment of the crown. Multiple witnesses. Evidence from Scarlet Fang territory. Testimony of suspicious conduct. The accusations rolled over her like stones, each one heavier than the last, until she could barely breathe beneath their weight. When the scholar finished, silence fell like snow. Leroy's golden eyes found Marilyn across the distance. For a moment, just a heartbeat, something flickered in their depths. Pain. Doubt. She couldn't read it before the mask slammed back into place. "These are serious charges," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Accusations that, if true, would constitute the highest form of treason. An attack not just on my person, but on the sacred nature of bonds themselves." True. Those two words hung in the air like executioner's blade. "However," Leroy continued, "they are only accusations, delivered anonymously, supported by witnesses who have not appeared to testify directly. In the interest of justice and the honor of this court." He paused, and the weight of 3,000 years of authority settled over his next words. "There will be a formal trial." The court erupted in murmurs. Trial. Public. Official. The scandal would spread across all 7 territories within days. Marilyn's vision swam. Her newly awakened power surged beneath her skin, responding to panic, but Kalira's training held, barely. She locked her knees to keep from collapsing. "The trial," Leroy's voice cut through the noise, silencing it instantly, "will convene in 3 days' time. Lady Marilyn will have opportunity to answer these charges. Witnesses will be summoned. Evidence will be examined. And the truth." His gaze locked with hers again, and this time she clearly read what burned there. Sorrow. Terrible ancient sorrow. Must be seen. By all. The words struck her like physical blows. He wasn't defending her. Wasn't using his absolute authority to dismiss the accusations as ridiculous. He was treating them as legitimate concerns requiring formal investigation. 'Cause he had to. Because he was king before he was anything else. Because the court demanded it, and his sovereignty rested on the appearance of impartial justice. But knowing the necessity didn't make it hurt less. Marilyn's heart, which had begun to heal in the warmth of the obsidian court, fractured again. Clean down the center, like glass struck precisely in its weakest point. She'd been here before, standing alone while everyone watched her break. The only difference was the setting. Instead of a forest clearing, an obsidian throne room. Instead of a minor pack, the seat of Lycan power itself. But the isolation felt exactly the same. Leroy rose from the throne, the gesture signaling the council's end. 3 days, he repeated, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Until then, Lady Marilyn will be confined to her quarters under guard. For her protection, a meaningful pause, and the court's guard, confinement, protection or imprisonment. The distinction blurred. Marilyn forced herself to stand straight as warriors approached to escort her away. Forced herself not to look back at Leroy, because if she saw doubt in those golden eyes, real doubt, not just political necessity, she would shatter completely. The crown of flame mark on her throat burned like a brand, a reminder of divine favor, or a collar marking her for judgment. She couldn't tell anymore. The quarters that had become Marilyn's sanctuary now felt like a gilded cage. 3 days. 72 hours of pacing obsidian floors while her mind circled the same impossible questions. How could she defend against accusations built on lies? How could she prove the absence of magic she'd never used? How could she? The window darkened. Not with night, it was barely past noon, but with presence. Kalira materialized from shadow itself, stepping through solid stone as though it were curtain rather than wall. That's, Marilyn's breath caught. How did you? The guards watched the door, not reality's edges. Kalira's galaxy eyes glowed in the dimness. And we have little time for explanations you don't need. She crossed to where Marilyn stood and placed both hands on her shoulders. The contact sent electricity through Marilyn's nervous system, ancestral power recognizing kindred strength. You're planning to remain silent at the trial, Kalira said. Not a question. What else can I do? Defend myself with words against invisible accusers. Beg for belief I haven't earned. Marilyn's laugh was bitter. I've learned that lesson. Silence has more dignity than pleading. Dignity. Kalira's grip tightened. Is that what you think the moon values? Pretty surrender. I don't know what she values. The words came raw, honest. I don't know why she chose me. I don't know anything except that I'm about to be destroyed in front of the entire realm, and the male who put his mark on me is treating me like... Her voice cracked. Like I might actually be guilty. Then you understand nothing. Kalira released her, stepped back. Look at your mark. Marilyn's hand rose reflexively to the crown of flame on her throat. It pulsed warmth beneath her fingers, steady as heartbeat despite her fear. Do you know what it takes to place that mark? Kalira's voice dropped to something ancient, resonant. Not desire. Not political calculation. Not even love, though that helps. She moved to the window, silhouette stark against afternoon light. The crown of flame can only be given by a true Lycan King to his fated queen. Not chosen mate. Not convenient alliance. Fated. Ordained by the moon herself before either wolf drew breath. Marilyn's throat tightened. That's why Elias couldn't give Lucinda his mark, even when he tried. Kalira turned, eyes boring into her. Why no amount of ceremony or declaration could forge that bond? The magic knows. It cannot be fooled, cannot be forced, and cannot be manipulated by compulsion spells or mortal scheming. She crossed back to Marilyn in 2 strides, placing her palm directly over the mark. Power flared, bright enough that both women gasped. This mark is proof, Kalira hissed. Unassailable, divine proof that you are exactly who the moon intended. That every accusation against you is lies built on jealousy and fear. The mark itself cannot exist on someone unworthy. It would reject false vessels, burn through skin that wasn't meant to carry it. Then why? Marilyn's voice shook. Why doesn't Leroy just say that? Why the trial? Why the... Because a king cannot rule by fiat alone. Kalira's expression softened fractionally. Especially not one who has lived 3,000 years watching kingdoms rise and fall based on public faith. He could declare your innocence, but doubt would fester. Conspiracy theories would spread. You'd spend your entire reign fighting whispers. She released Marilyn's throat, the crown mark still glowing faintly. But if your accusers condemn themselves publicly, if the lies collapse under their own weight before witnesses from all 7 territories, Kalira's smile turned sharp. Then you are vindicated not by royal decree, but by truth itself. And no one can question it. Understanding crashed over Marilyn like cold water. He's using the trial. Not to judge me but to expose the rot. Kalira nodded. He knows you're innocent. Has known from the first accusation, because the mark burns on your throat and you still breathe. But the court needed to see it. The realm needed to watch poison purge itself. And if it doesn't work, Marilyn whispered, if the lies are too well crafted, then your mark will speak for you. Kalira's hand moved to Marilyn's chest, directly over her heart. The power you've been training, your grandmother's legacy, the ancestral strength sleeping in your blood, it responds to truth. Justice. When you stand in that clearing tomorrow and the accusations fly, your power will recognize the lies. And it will burn them away. The certainty in her voice was absolute. Terrifying. Exhilarating. Trust your blood, Kalira said again, echoing words from their first training session. Trust your mark. And trust that a king who has survived 3 millennia knows exactly what he's doing. She stepped back toward the shadow curtain she'd entered through. Sleep tonight if you can. Tomorrow, you reclaim everything they tried to steal. Then she was gone, dissolved into darkness, leaving Marilyn alone with racing thoughts and glowing mark. Trust. Such a simple word for something that felt impossible. But the crown of flame pulsed steadily on her throat. Warm, constant, real. Divine proof. Marilyn pressed her palm over it and closed her eyes. Grandmother, she thought, reaching for that ancestral connection Kalira had awakened. If you can hear me, if any of this is real, I need your strength tomorrow. Because I'm terrified of failing. Of disappointing him. Of proving everyone right who said I was never meant for this. The mark flared once beneath her palm. And somewhere in the blood-deep places where memory lived, she felt an answer. Not words but certainty. Warrior confidence passed down through generations. You are Celine's granddaughter, the feeling whispered. You do not fail. You do not bend. You burn. Dawn broke cold over Bloodpine clearing. The same altar. The same ancient trees. The same crescent moon now descending toward western horizon. Waning, but still powerful enough to make the air shimmer with divine presence. Everything the same. Everything different. Last time, Marilyn had stood here as Omega Bride, hopeful and naive. Now she arrived in chains, symbolic ones, iron cuffs linked by silver that burned faintly against her skin. Prisoner awaiting judgment rather than bride awaiting blessing. The assembled crowd dwarfed the original ceremony. Every pack from the 7 territories had sent representatives. Territorial alphas in formal regalia. Nobles from the Obsidian Court. Warriors, scholars, seers. Thousands of wolves packed into the clearing and surrounding forest. So many that their combined presence made reality feel thick, compressed. All watching. All judging. The altar had been converted to makeshift tribunal. 3 thrones of carved wood sat behind it. Leroy in the center, Lord Cashin to his right, Lady Seraphine to his left. The Council of Final Judgment, assembled only for highest crimes. Marilyn was led before them by guards in ceremonial armor, their grips professional but not cruel. She kept her spine straight, chin level. Kalira's words echoed. Let your actions speak. She would not cower, would not plead, would not give them the broken Omega they expected. Leroy's golden eyes found hers across the clearing. For one heartbeat, so brief she might have imagined it, warmth flickered there. Recognition. Something that might have been apology or promise or both. Then the mask slammed back. King not mate. Judge not lover. This trial. His voice rang across the clearing, amplified by ancient acoustics and power itself. Has been convened to address accusations of forbidden magic, treasonous enchantment, and deliberate manipulation of sacred bond law. The formal charges. Same ones from the council session, but somehow worse when delivered in open air before assembled realm. The accused will face her accusers directly. Witnesses will testify. Evidence will be examined. Leroy's expression remained carved stone. And by trial's end, truth will be known, whatever that truth may be. He gestured, and guards brought forward a small platform where Marilyn would stand. She mounted it with careful dignity, iron cuffs clinking softly. From her elevated position she could see everything. Thousands of faces. All the judgment. All the anticipation. And in the front row, dressed in midnight blue that made her look like grieving widow, Lucinda. Their eyes met. Lucinda's were dry, calm, perfectly composed. The picture of concerned nobility reluctantly performing civic duty. But beneath the surface, Marilyn saw it. Triumphant malice barely contained. This was Lucinda's moment. Her revenge, served publicly and absolutely. Lady Lucinda Ashford. Lord Cashin's voice carried formal weight. You have come forward with testimony regarding the accused conduct prior to the bonding ceremony. Please share what you witnessed. Lucinda rose gracefully, moving to a second platform positioned opposite Marilyn's. When she spoke, her voice carried perfectly, trained, modulated, designed for maximum impact. It grieves me deeply to speak against another she-wolf, she began, and gods, she even made her voice tremble slightly. Particularly one who has risen so high from such humble origins. But truth must be served, regardless of personal cost. Murmurs through the crowd. Proving nods. She was playing them perfectly. 3 days before the bonding ceremony, Lucinda continued, I witnessed Lady Marilyn meeting with my intended, Elias, in the eastern forest. Alone. In secret. Gasps rippled through assembled wolves. At the time I thought nothing of it. Perhaps a final goodbye between former packmates. But later, Elias's behavior became strange. distant, as though his mind was not entirely his own. She paused, letting implications sink in. When he rejected Marilyn publicly during the ceremony, I watched her carefully. There was no surprise in her expression, no genuine pain, just. Lucinda's voice dropped to wounded whisper. Calculation. As though events were unfolding exactly as she'd planned. That's not, Marilyn started, but Leroy raised one hand. The accused will have opportunity to speak after all testimony has been heard. Silenced. Again. Just like before. Marilyn's jaw clenched, but she nodded once. Trust the process. Trust the mark. Trust. I consulted with Pax Seers. Lucinda pressed her advantage. They confirmed traces of compulsion magic in the clearing that night. Subtle, expertly woven, designed to manipulate emotions and decisions. More gasp. The crowd's energy shifted. Curiosity hardening toward suspicion. And the most damning evidence. Lucinda produced a small vial from her dress, holding it high. This tonic, found in Marilyn's former quarters. Analysis shows it contains moonshadow root and whisper silk. Ingredients used exclusively in forbidden compulsion spells. The vial glittered in dawn light. Perfect prop. Perfectly damning. My theory, Lucinda's voice rang with righteous conviction, is that Marilyn orchestrated the entire ceremony. Used magic to ensure Elias would reject her publicly, knowing the Lycan King was watching. Knowing he would feel sympathy for a humiliated Omega. Knowing, she turned to face Leroy directly, that his protective instincts would override proper caution. You're saying, Lady Seraphine interjected quietly, that she manipulated events specifically to attract the king's attention? I'm saying she's brilliant. Lucinda's smile was poisonous honey. Cunning enough to recognize an opportunity and ruthless enough to exploit it. An Omega with nothing to lose and everything to gain, willing to use any method, including forbidden magic, to rise above her station. The clearing erupted in whispers. Pack members exchanging glances. Even some of Leroy's own guards looked uncertain. Marilyn felt it, the tide turning against her. Just like in Scarlet Fong, when Elias's rejection had made her pariah. Public opinion shifting toward condemnation before she'd spoken a single word in defense. History repeating. Except this time the stakes were her life. Lady Marilyn, Lord Cashan's voice cut through whispers. You've heard the testimony. What is your response? Every eye turned to her. Thousands of wolves waiting for defense, explanation, pleading. Marilyn stood silent. Not from fear. Not from defeat. But from certainty growing in her chest like sunrise. Kalira's words ringing true. Your mark will speak for you. Lady Marilyn, Cashan repeated. You must answer the charges. Still she remained silent. Lifted her chin. Let them see her clearly. Not broken Omega but something else. Something beginning to wake. The crown of flame mark on her throat began to glow. Softly at first. Just faint golden light, easily dismissed as dawn reflection. But it grew brighter with each heartbeat, pulsing in rhythm with power surging beneath her skin. Ancestral strength responding to lies, to injustice, to false accusations against one carrying divine favor. The clearing itself responded. Wind rose from nowhere, sweeping through assembled crowd with force that made even territorial alphas sway. No natural breeze. This carried power, intention, the weight of lunar magic recognizing its own. The crown mark blazed brighter. Golden radiance swept outward from Marilyn like ripples in pool, washing over the crowd in waves of pure, undeniable truth force. Wolves gasped. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stared, transfixed. Because the light didn't just illuminate, it revealed. Stripped away pretense, burned through lies, exposed reality in its rawest form. And every wolf there felt it. This was not the power of compulsion magic or forbidden spells. This was divine authority. The moon's own blessing made manifest. No manipulator could channel such radiance. No deceiver could bear such a mark without burning. The silence that fell was absolute. religious, terrified. Marilyn stood in the center of golden storm, power crackling through her veins, Mark blazing like second sun. Her grandmother's strength fully awakened, her true nature finally revealed. Not Omega. Not really. Queen. Warrior. Moonchosen. Leroy rose from his throne slowly, and for the first time since the trial began, he smiled. Dark. Knowing. Satisfied. I believe, he said into ringing silence, we have our answer regarding the accused magical abilities. However, Leroy continued, still smiling that dangerous smile, questions remain. Specifically regarding the source of these accusations. He gestured, and guards emerged from the tree line, escorting a weasel-faced man in chains. The merchant, Silas, who'd delivered Lucinda's poison throughout the territories. Lucinda's face went white. This man, Leroy announced, was apprehended attempting to flee the realm 3 days ago. When questioned about unusual activities in recent weeks, he became quite cooperative. Silas stumbled forward, pushed by guards. His eyes darted frantically between Leroy and Lucinda. Tell them, Leroy commanded. Tell everyone here exactly who paid you to deliver those messages. Who provided the evidence of Marilyn's supposed crimes. Silas's voice cracked. I was just following orders. Just delivering messages like any merchant. Tell them. The command cracked like whip. Alpha authority amplified by 3 millennia of accumulated power. Impossible to resist. Silas crumpled. Lady Lucinda Ashford. The words tumbled out in rush. She paid me. Gave me gold and messages and told me exactly who to contact. Said the new queen had manipulated the king and I'd be protecting the realm by spreading the truth. Another pause for breath. But it wasn't truth. It was lies. All of it. The testimonies, the evidence, the witnesses. She crafted it all. Paid wolves to swear they'd seen things that never happened. Even had me plant that vial in the Omega quarters after Marilyn had already left for the Obsidian Court. The crowd erupted. Not whispers now but roars. Outrage. Betrayal. All eyes turned to Lucinda. She stood frozen on her platform, beautiful face cycling through emotions, denial, fury, desperation, before settling on something cold and hateful. You have no proof, she spat. This merchant would say anything under torture. We didn't torture him. Leroy's smile widened. We simply offered him immunity in exchange for truth. And verification was easy enough. He produced a familiar purse, heavy with gold. Your personal seal is stamped on the inside of the leather. Careless, really. Lucinda's hands clenched. You knew. From the beginning you knew. Of course I knew. Leroy descended from his throne with predatory grace. Did you truly believe I wouldn't recognize lies about my fated mate? That I couldn't feel the truth of her innocence through our bond? He laughed, and it was dark as midnight. I knew. But I needed you to reveal yourself. Needed the realm to see the poison festering in its own ranks. He stopped before Lucinda's platform, looking up at her with 3,000 years of disappointed authority. I believed my queen enough to let the world prove her right, he said quietly. I trusted her mark, her strength, her truth. And I trusted that deceit always, eventually, exposes itself. No. Lucinda backed away, though there was nowhere to go. No, this isn't, it was supposed to be. You. Leroy's voice went cold. Yes, we know. You've said as much in your schemes. But the moon doesn't choose based on status or breeding or what was supposed to be. He turned to face the assembled crowd. Let this be lesson to all territories. Divine favor cannot be stolen. Sacred bonds cannot be manufactured. And those who attempt to subvert lunar will through lies and poison. His voice rose to thunder, will be exposed and condemned. The golden light still radiating from Marilyn intensified. No longer soft glow, but searing radiance that made Lucinda scream, not from physical pain, but from spiritual recognition. The moon herself, rejecting the false accuser. Divine light washing over Lucinda like judgment fire, stripping away every beautiful lie she'd wrapped herself in, revealing the corroded jealousy underneath. It was supposed to be me. Lucinda's scream tore across the clearing, raw and agonized. All pretense shattered, all composure gone. I did everything right. I was perfect. I maintained my status and my beauty and my bloodline, and I was perfect. Tears streamed down her face, ugly and real. And she, pointing at Marilyn with shaking hand, she did nothing. She was Omega. Broken. Worthless. The golden light pressed closer. But the moon chose her anyway. Lucinda's voice cracked completely. Chose her over me. Gave her divine favor and sacred marks and a king, and I got. She looked at her empty hands. Nothing. Less than nothing. Got pitted. Rejected. Forgotten. She turned to the crowd, to Leroy, to anyone who might listen. How is that fair? How is it justice when someone who never tried gets everything while someone who gave their entire life to being worthy gets discarded like? Her voice failed. She collapsed on the platform, shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded like something dying. The clearing fell silent except for her weeping. Even fury had its limits. This was just broken. A wolf who'd built entire identity on being chosen, watching that foundation crumble to nothing. Marilyn felt it through the golden light. Not satisfaction but painful empathy. Because she knew what it felt like to be rejected. To watch your life's purpose dissolve. To stand before everyone and be found wanting. The difference was Lucinda had turned that pain outward, into poison. While Marilyn had survived, her grandmother's voice whispered in her blood. You survived. And then you rose. The golden light began to recede, pulled back into Marilyn's skin. The crown of flame mark settled to steady glow. Power controlled. Justice served. Truth revealed. Leroy turned back to his throne, voice ringing with finality. Lucinda Ashford, you are found guilty of treason, conspiracy, and attempt to subvert sacred bond law. Your titles are stripped. Your status revoked. You will be exiled from all 7 territories. Wait. Marilyn's voice cut through the pronouncement. First words she'd spoken during entire trial. Every eye turned to her. She stepped down from her platform, chains still binding her wrists, though they hung loose now, melted slightly by the power that had surged through her. I want to speak, she said clearly. Not in my defense, that's been proven. But about her sentence. Leroy's eyebrows rose fractionally. You wish to address Lucinda's punishment. I do. Silence. Confusion. What could the victim possibly say to soften justice? Marilyn walked toward where Lucinda still knelt, broken. Stop just outside reaching distance. I know what you're feeling, she said quietly. The rejection. The sense that everything you built your life on was lie. That you were passed over for reasons that make no sense. Lucinda looked up, tear-stained and hateful. I know, Marilyn continued. Because Elias made me feel exactly that. When he rejected me for you, I thought I was worthless, broken. That the moon had made mistake including me in anything sacred. She took a breath. But I was wrong. And so are you. Her voice strengthened. The moon doesn't make mistakes. She doesn't owe us the lives we planned. And being passed over for one path doesn't mean we're worthless. It means our path lies elsewhere. There is no elsewhere for me. Lucinda's voice was ash. I have nothing left. Then build something new. Marilyn met her eyes steadily. That's what I had to do. That's what anyone who survives rejection has to do. We build new lives from ruins of old expectations. He turned to Leroy. Don't exile her. She's dangerous because she's desperate and broken, but exile will only harden that into something worse. Give her chance to rebuild. Under supervision, under restriction, but with possibility of redemption. The crowd murmured, shocked, confused. Mercy. For this. But Leroy was smiling. Really smiling now. Not the dark satisfaction from before, but genuine warmth. You would show mercy to one who tried to destroy you. I would show her the same grace I needed when my life shattered. Marilyn's chin lifted. Because queens don't just punish. They heal. They build. They transform poison into something that serves the realm. Silence. Then Leroy descended from his throne entirely, crossed to where Marilyn stood, and with single gesture, and broke the chains binding her wrists. They fell away like water. He cupped her face in both hands, golden eyes blazing with pride. My queen, he murmured loud enough for only her to hear. My brilliant, merciful, impossible queen. Then louder to the crowd. The accused is cleared of all charges. Her innocence proven by divine light and exposed conspiracy. And her mercy, he turned, still holding Marilyn, will shape her reign. To Lucinda, you will remain in Scarlet Fang territory under house supervision. Your titles stripped, but your life and chance for redemption preserved. If Queen Marilyn's mercy proves wise, time will tell. If not, his voice went cold, exile remains option. He looked back at Marilyn, and in his eyes she saw everything he hadn't said during the trial. All the fear that his gambit might fail. All the trust that had kept him playing distant while she stood accused. All the love he'd been holding back until truth could be proven. Take me home, she whispered. And in front of the assembled realm, in the same clearing where she'd been rejected and then chosen, the Lycan King kissed his queen. The golden light flared one final time. Benediction and promise both. The trial was over. The poison purged. And something new, something stronger than either had been alone, began to rise. The golden radiance hadn't faded. It pulsed around Marilyn like living heartbeat, settling into her skin but still visible. Corona of divine favor that made even territorial alphas lower their eyes. Lucinda remained on her knees, broken and weeping. But something in Marilyn's chest had shifted during that kiss. Not hardness. She would never let cruelty root in her heart, but clarity. Understanding of what justice truly meant. She stepped away from Leroy. The chains that had bound her wrists now scattered fragments on sacred ground. Walked toward Lucinda with measured grace, each footfall deliberate. The crowd held collective breath. When Marilyn stopped before her former tormentor, she didn't crouch to meet her eyes. Didn't offer hand or comfort. Instead she stood tall. Omega no longer but something ancient and powerful made flesh. Lucinda Ashford. Her voice carried across the clearing without strain, amplified by the same lunar magic that had exposed the lies. You sought to steal what the moon freely gave. You wielded poison where you should have sought wisdom. You turned sacred ritual into weapon. Lucinda looked up, mascara streaked and desperate. Please. I offered you mercy, Marilyn continued. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because mercy is what separates queens from tyrants. You will live. You will have chance to rebuild. But the golden light intensified, flowing down Marilyn's arms like liquid sunrise. The moon turns her face from you. The words resonated with power beyond Marilyn's own. Divine pronouncement channeled through mortal throat. And as they echoed across Bloodpine Clearing, something visible shifted. The faint shimmer of lunar blessing that touched every wolf, that connection to the goddess all Lycans carried from birth, dimmed around Lucinda. Not extinguished but withdrawn, distant. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They could see it, feel it. Divine favor rescinded. Lucinda screamed, not pain but loss. The severing of connection she'd taken for granted her entire life. Still Lycan, still wolf, but no longer touched by the moon's direct grace. Living reminder of what jealousy cost. Take her to Scarlet Fang, Marilyn said quietly to the guards. House supervision as the king decreed. She lives, but she is exiled from the moon's inner light until she proves herself worthy of restoration. If she ever could. The unspoken addition hung heavy. Guards lifted Lucinda, now limp, shock-dulled, and led her away. The crowd parted like water, none willing to touch even her shadow. Marilyn watched her go, feeling nothing but exhausted peace. Justice served. Mercy extended. Balance restored. Marilyn. The voice came from her left. Familiar. Once beloved. Elias. He stood at the edge of the crowd, still magnificent in his physical form but somehow diminished, as though standing near true divine favor exposed how mundane he'd always been. He moved forward slowly, each step seeming to cost him, stopped 10 feet away and, to the shock of assembled wolves, dropped to both knees. "My queen," he said, voice breaking. "I stand before you, kneel before you to confess my blindness." Marilyn turned to face him fully, felt Leroy's presence behind her, steady and warm, but this moment was hers alone. "I rejected you," Elias continued, words tumbling out like confession. "Publicly humiliated you in this very clearing because I was too proud to see what the moon had shown me. Too arrogant to recognize divine favor when it stood before me in simple dress and quiet strength." His hands clenched against his thighs. "I chose status over substance, beauty over truth. I chose," he glanced toward where Lucinda had been, "poison when I could have had gold." The clearing was silent except for wind through bloodpine needles. "I don't ask forgiveness," Elias said quietly. "I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know, needed you to know that my rejection was not reflection of your worth. It was mirror of my own emptiness." He bowed his head. "You were always meant for greater things than me. The moon knew. I was just too blind to see." Marilyn studied him, this wolf who had shaped so much of her pain, who had broken something in her that she'd had to painstakingly rebuild. Felt the anger she'd carried toward him, examined it in light of everything she'd learned, and found it gone. Not suppressed or denied, but genuinely dissolved. 'Cause he was right. She had been meant for greater things. His rejection hadn't diminished her. It had freed her for the path she was always supposed to walk. "I forgive you, Elias." The words came easily without weight or cost. "Not because you've earned it, but because I won't carry anger into my future. You were chapter 1 had to close to reach this one." She didn't extend hand or offer him rise. Simply turned away, returning to Leroy's side. Elias remained kneeling, but she felt his eyes on her back, watching his former Omega become the queen he'd been too small to deserve. She never looked back. The moon, still visible as pale disk in brightening sky, suddenly blazed. Full solar eclipse in reverse, lunar light intensifying until it outshone the rising sun, bathing bloodpine clearing in silver-gold radiance that made reality itself shimmer. Marilyn gasped as power surged through her. Not the gradual awakening of her grandmother's legacy, but something vaster, divine. The moon herself reaching down to touch her chosen vessel. The crown of flame mark on Marilyn's throat ignited. Golden fire poured from the symbol, spreading across her skin in intricate patterns. Not burning but transforming. The mark evolved before thousands of witnesses, expanding from simple crescent into elaborate crown of flame and starlight that wreathed her head in visible power. Wolves throughout the clearing dropped to their knees. Even territorial alphas. Even ancient nobles who'd seen millennia pass. Because this was coronation beyond mortal ceremony. Divine investiture witnessed by the goddess herself. The crown settled into Marilyn's skin, not separate adornment but part of her. Visible manifestation of lunar favor that would mark her as chosen queen for all her days. When the light finally dimmed enough for eyes to adjust, Marilyn stood transformed. Still herself, same face, same body, same essential spirit, but radiant, powerful, unmistakably divine. And Leroy, ancient king who'd knelt to no one in 3,000 years, lowered himself to one knee before her. "My queen," he said, voice resonating with absolute certainty. "My equal, my partner, chosen by the moon to stand beside me, not behind, not beneath, but with." He took her hand, pressed it to his chest where his own mark blazed in response to hers. The crown of flame on her brow pulsed in perfect synchronization with the matching symbol over his heart. Two halves of divine whole. King and queen. Balance made manifest. "Rise," Marilyn whispered, though her voice carried to every corner of the clearing. We rise together or not at all. And when they stood, hands still joined, the assembled realm witnessed something that hadn't occurred in recorded history. A perfectly equal bond. Not king who chose queen or queen who served king, but true partnership ordained by divine will. The moon pulsed once more. Benediction and promise both. Then settled back to normal pale presence, having delivered her message. The formal proceedings followed swiftly. One by one, the territorial alphas approached. Blood Moon, Silver Peak, Stormcrest, Ashenfang, Crimson Ridge, even Scarletfang under its new interim leadership. Each knelt before the dual thrones that had been erected at the altar's base, swearing loyalty to king and queen both. No distinction in their oaths. No hierarchy. United sovereignty. When the last pack had sworn allegiance, Leroy rose, Marilyn beside him, and addressed the assembled realm. Let it be known throughout the 7 territories, his voice rang with 3 millennia of authority, that new law is established this day. Any wolf who publicly mocks or undermines the goddess's chosen pairs will answer directly to this throne. He paused, letting the declaration settle. Too long have we tolerated cruelty masquerading as tradition. Too long have we allowed status and breeding to override divine will. The moon chooses whom she chooses, Omega or Alpha, common or noble, and her wisdom is not subject to mortal judgment. His eyes swept the crowd, ensuring every wolf felt the weight of his words. This realm will be sanctuary for all fated pairs, protection for those the moon has blessed, and any who seek to corrupt or destroy sacred bonds. His voice went cold. Will face justice as swift and absolute as what transpired here today. Thunder of approval rose from assembled wolves. Not polite applause but genuine roaring support. Because most of them had felt it. The wrongness of watching bonds mocked, the pain of seeing the moon's gifts treated as political tools. This law would protect them all. Furthermore, Marilyn's voice joined Leroy's, clear and strong. Let mercy be as foundational to our justice as punishment. Those who falter will be given chance to rise. Those who fall will find hands extended to lift them, provided they prove willing to change. She thought of Lucinda, of Elias, of everyone who'd stumbled in their paths. We build realm where lunar light reaches all corners, where divine favor is recognized regardless of rank, where strength is measured not by dominance, but by capacity for growth. The words resonated with her grandmother's legacy, with Kalira's teachings, with everything she'd learned in her journey from rejected Omega to crowned queen. This is our promise, Marilyn and Leroy spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing with power that made the air itself vibrate. Justice tempered by mercy, strength balanced by compassion, and above all, respect for the moon's wisdom in all her mysterious workings. The clearing erupted in howls, thousands of wolves giving voice to approval, to joy, to hope for what this new reign would bring. The blood pine altar, site of so much pain and manipulation, was cleansed by the sound, transformed from place of humiliation into foundation for something better. Hours later, after the crowds had dispersed and the clearing had emptied, Marilyn stood at the altar alone. Not truly alone. Leroy waited nearby, giving her space but remaining present. Always present now. The partnership they'd forged wasn't performance or political necessity. It was truth deep as bone. She ran her fingers over the ancient stone, remembering. 3 weeks ago, she'd stood here as Omega Bride, hope and terror warring in her chest. Believed herself chosen for Elias, prepared to build life around his strength. Now she wore crown of divine flame and commanded loyalty of entire realm. The journey between those moments felt simultaneously endless and instantaneous. Every humiliation, every doubt, every moment of wanting to surrender, all of it had been necessary. Refinement rather than destruction. The moon burning away everything that wasn't essential until only truth remained. Regrets. Leroy's voice came soft from behind her. Marilyn considered the question honestly. Did she regret the pain? The rejection, the trial that had nearly destroyed her? No, she said finally. I wouldn't choose it again, but I don't regret it. Because that Omega who stood here 3 weeks ago couldn't have been this. She gestured to the crown still glowing faintly on her brow. She had to break first. Had to learn what she was made of when everything else was stripped away. Leroy moved to stand beside her, shoulder to shoulder. The moon only gives us trials we can survive. Does she? Marilyn looked at him sidelong. Or does she just know which of us will find ways to survive regardless of what's thrown at us? He laughed. Genuine, delighted sound. 3,000 years, and you ask questions I've never considered. You're going to reshape everything, aren't you? We are, she corrected. Together. Together, he agreed. The moon, now high in afternoon sky despite her nocturnal nature, pulsed with approval. They stood in comfortable silence until Leroy finally spoke again. They mocked you for being weak, my queen. Marilyn turned to face him fully. His golden eyes held infinite warmth, infinite pride. The moon only waited for you to rise. And in those words, Marilyn heard echo of every voice that had supported her journey. Her grandmother's legacy, Kalira's teachings, even the small kindnesses from wolves like Marcus who'd seen value when others saw only Omega. She hadn't risen despite being Omega. She'd risen because being Omega had taught her strength that alphas, comfortable in their power, never had to learn. Resilience forged in rejection. Wisdom born from surviving dismissal. The moon had known exactly what she was doing. Marilyn took Leroy's hand, twining their fingers together. The marks on their bodies pulsed in harmony. His heart, her crown, 2 parts of sacred whole. Then let's not keep her waiting, Marilyn said. We have realm to transform. Together, they walked from the blood pine altar into afternoon light. Behind them, the clearing that had witnessed so much pain now held only peace. The blood pines rustled in wind that carried no malice, only promise. And above, the moon, visible despite daylight, impossible yet undeniable, shone bright enough to silver the world. Laughter had been replaced by reverent silence. Mockery transformed into awe. And the Omega who'd been rejected by mortal wolf now walked as equal partner to immortal king, crowned by divine fire, chosen by the moon herself. The story that had begun in humiliation ended in glory. But more importantly, it ended in truth. And truth, Marilyn had learned, was the only foundation worth building kingdoms upon.